So, good morning, everybody. Two ways of playing this today. One is the safe and the middle ground, and the other one is to get a little bit passionate. We've spent money, we've given up time, we've come here today to talk about fraud, so do you know what, let's take a risk and go the passionate route. I believe in what I do. If you didn't believe in what you did, you wouldn't be here either. So, collectively, we slap each other on the back, we're doing a great job. Yeah. We're not doing near enough, okay, and we need to change gears and we need to accelerate very, very fast. So I did one of these once, and on the customer feedback forms, you know, give the assessment, one lady had written, "What a very angry little man." and she's right, yeah, I am a very angry little man, but it was passion, it wasn't anger, okay, it wasn't emotional, it was a raw belief in what we do. So there are a few slides, and I don't believe in death through PowerPoint. I've got 6 slides. Between them, I think there are 61 words altogether. So there's not too much up there for the reading, but I hope to engage through conversation. Curiosity boosts results. Yes, it does. Pure and simple. The more we look, the more we find. When we know what we're looking for, it's much easier to find it, and we find it much more quickly. But if we're not looking, we're not going to achieve anything. So there's a question there. Is fraud on the rise? Or is the industry just getting better at detecting it? And I've heard the question on a number of occasions, and it really annoys me. Here comes the angry little man thing. Are we winning? I don't think so. Will we ever win? I don't think so. And the previous speaker talked about the arms race, and he's dead right. They accelerate and evolve, we accelerate and evolve. Are we keeping pace? Will we overtake them? In 3 years' time, will we be sat back in this hotel or another one talking about fraud and how we're combating it? Of course we will. I don't think we're ever going to beat them, but we can certainly beat some of them. Will we stop it completely? No. And the difference between fraud and war is even the bloodiest of wars come to an end eventually. Fraud and crime are ongoing continuously. It's not going to go away. Global hotspots. There's a map up there. There's no key to it. And the reason for a lack of key is deliberate. Everything's blue. Could be a throwback to my days in Zurich, where it was the only colour panel we were allowed to use, various shades of blue. But we'll see there's dark blues, light blues. For this slide in particular, we'll concentrate on the dark. And where it's darker, we're talking about more activity. So when we look at the globe as a whole, and we have to remember that in the industry now, you know, the globe is becoming much, much smaller. We can traverse countries much more quickly, we've got cheaper travel, it's far easier to communicate, to develop policies, to make claims and so on across different geographies. So if we look at this as a whole, and if we start over here, the similarity is they share borders. Okay, all of the countries at the top there border each other. You could, in theory, walk from one side to the other. Does that assist the fraudster? Absolutely. It's far easier to move within the countries. There are boundaries, but they're not enforced. In relation to the other dark blue areas, when we look at North America, Canada, Australia, there are similarities there as well. For the most part, those outlying ones, ex-colonies, English-speaking. It hints of a cultural alignment. They may have evolved in different directions, but started from the same place. So we've got commonalities between them. I said at the start that curiosity brings results. And when we look for something, and if we know what we're looking for, it's far easier to find. I won't do the hands in the air thing, but if you think to yourself, what kind of frauds would we expect to find in those darker blue countries? You know, they're more developed, and I don't mean that in a derogatory to the underdeveloped countries, but they're more developed in relation to the economy, the stability in most of the region for their politics. There's a lot of industry. There's a demand and an appetite for insurance, and therefore there's likely to be a coinciding amount of fraud associated with that. The types of policies we sell in those areas will be very different. A lot of lifestyle policies, a lot of protective ones. You know, we talk about directors and officers in companies protecting themselves against actions of their employees or actions against them. If we know the culture within those countries and we know the kind of policies that we're selling, it's very easy to target the kind of frauds that we think we're going to see and watch them move around. If we look at the next one here, for emerging patterns, it's a very different part of the world. And the yellows and the reds are the hot spots there. What would we expect to see when we sell insurance into these countries? They're underdeveloped, okay? And again, not derogatory, but we call them emerging or developing. Okay? Different lifestyles, different kinds of insurance needs. In most of these, insurance isn't obligatory, it's not mandatory, it's an optional thing. So if you're going to spend your money buying insurance, why are you buying it? What kind of insurances are you buying, and where do the risks for fraud come into that? And the chances are we'd be looking for very different patterns in these countries against the blue ones. We might be looking at far less from the business side or the lifestyle side and far more on the day-to-day stuff. What I find interesting about these is when we look for fraud, we find it. When we look for a particular kind of fraud, we find it. But are we being open-minded enough? Are we ruling out fraud that's occurring here and now, every day, because we're looking in the wrong places, because we're patting ourselves on the back for a job well done on identifying the fraud that we strongly suspect exists, and we're providing to ourselves day in, day out the evidence that it's there? In relation to the first slide, 100%, 80, 60, 40, all the way down to no data. The IP up there, it doesn't stand for a kind of insurance or a link between them on a cultural basis. That's internet penetration across the world. And I use it only as an example. I'm not suggesting that the internet is the driver of all fraud. It's useful, but it's not the only reason. I'm using it because the countries there are highlighted because of their access to the internet. But without knowing that key in advance, if we look at it from a fraudulent point of view, we're going to start putting certain policies in place in our minds, the kind of investigative tools that we need. We're closing in our own parameters and we're becoming very narrow in what we look for. In relation to the next one, 125, that's dollars. That's the amount of money a day that people are living on within those countries. So the reds and the yellows, the high passion spots there, are the percentage of the population that live in those countries on less than $1.25 a day. And again, we can read into the stats and the figures any way we like, but we need to open out our minds in relation to how we do it. When we talk about trends and threats, we need to take a huge step backwards and say, okay, where are the real trends? Where are the real threats coming from? And how are we going to react to them? Optional car insurance in the UK, horrible idea, okay? I deal with a lot of different countries. In some of the countries I deal in, car insurance is not mandatory. In South Africa, 70% of cars have no insurance. It's not a legal requirement. You can drive your car on the road with no insurance at all, no problem. A small fee at the petrol pump goes to the government. That's used to pay out bodily injury claims. So the only reason for the insurance is the bent metal aspect of the claim. Is it a good idea? Probably not. Does it work for them? Yes, it does. In South Africa, if you have a white car, it's cheaper to insure because it's seen to be a more visible piece of metal on the road. So if we were looking at fraud in South Africa, and I do, if we saw a two-vehicle collision where we believed it was induced or forced, and the apparently at-fault vehicle was relatively new, and it was white, we might consider that a slam dunk. It's relatively new, so it's expensive, they're not cheap to buy there, and it's white, so it's going to be cheaper to insure. Therefore, it's probably going to be targeted by those seeking to have a collision with somebody with insurance. A newish white car in South Africa, 99% of the time, it's got car insurance in a market where 70% of them haven't. If the fraudsters are narrowing down their net in that way, and we're responding accordingly, we're catching those particular frauds. But there's only a small percentage of cars that are white and brand new in South Africa. Is fraud occurring on the others? Of course it is. If we focus on only on the white ones, are we missing the rest? Yes, we are. So we need to broaden our horizons. There's a couple of other points on there. Rent-a-body. In South Africa again, you can go to the mortuary, you can slip the mortician $200, and you can borrow yourself a dead body for a couple of hours. It's true. Fantastic. So you take out a life policy on a bogus relative, you pay the premiums for a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is. You produce a dead body to the doctor. He's going to ask you who it is, and you tell him. It's going to be the same name as the policy. There's a real live dead body there. Return it to the morgue, everybody's happy. Okay? But if we're not looking for that, we're not going to find it. Once you have that knowledge, it's much easier to track it down. Had a case recently. Guy was burned to death in a car. The autopsy showed he's got smoke inhalation. He's got burning in his esophagus. He's got all the classic symptoms of having died in the car fire. It was the second car fire this guy had been in. He died in one previously, quite accidentally. Then had been insured, and The carcass had been put into another one and that had been set fire to. It was identified because the witness heard no screaming. They saw no movement from the person inside the car trying to get out. So it was a silent scream. It was all the things that weren't there that led us to decide it was fraud rather than the things that were. So the physical evidence, the body, the autopsy, everything else was grand, but the things we expected to see weren't there. So is the fraud real or is it perceived? The more we look, the more we find. If we know what we're looking for, we know we're going to find it. But are we looking in the right places? Can we broaden our horizons? Yes, we can. I've got a picture of my personal car up there. It's the last Ferrari I have in my collection. You're probably the same yourselves. And I stuck Sandy underneath it. Hurricane Sandy hit the US recently. An awful lot of cars, businesses were damaged. Insurance claims went in. America being America, it's very organised, efficient. It's back up and running, no problem. Where are all the damaged cars? People working in downtown Manhattan that take a car. A lot of good ones. Ferraris, Jags, Porsches, you name it, they're all there. They've all been written off and paid for by us as an industry. The cars have been sold off at auction as write-offs. They're dried out, they're in containers, they're heading towards Europe, guys. They're coming into Germany, they're coming into Austria, Switzerland, all the places where people are looking for high-end cars and they've got money to spend. And on the surface, these cars look fine. But they've been salt water damaged. They're never going to be right. In 2 or 3 years' time, they're going to be rusting heaps. In 2 or 3 years' time, are we as an industry going to see a peak in claims for written off or damaged motor vehicles, where somebody's bought a lemon that's rotten to pieces underneath them and they're trying to get the money back through us? Of course they are. So we can see a little bit into the future if we take some of the information we have now and transfer it across the globe, but we can't see nearly far enough, and we can't see it all either. So the point I made at the start in relation to curiosity boosts results, yes. Are we right to be curious? Absolutely. Are we doing enough? No. Are we winning? No. Will we ever win? Probably not. But if we do our very best to try and keep abreast of it, if we try and use the information we have on a global basis to try and predict some of the movement and the different frauds as they emerge, we'll have a better chance of keeping up. We'll never overtake, but we might keep up. I don't know if there's anybody from confused.com in today, but if there is, thank you. I read the internet avidly. I love fraud. I'm passionate about it. And a story caught my eye recently was sent to me. It was a confused.com case. An American lawyer had a very big passion for cigars. And he bought a packet of 24 of whichever ones they are, I don't know, something very expensive, and he insured them. And then he made a claim for property lost in a series of very small fires. So 24 small fires to be exact. The company that insured them went through the policy. Yeah, they had to pay out. So they paid out for these 24 small fires. And the lawyer was very happy with himself. They then had him arrested for 24 cases of arson, which I thought was a little bit justice. So guys, that's it from me. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to take them. Thank you.
Any questions from the floor? I'll ask one, start things going. We're always identifying new trends.
Yes.
We say we're identifying new trends.
Yep.
But are we really identifying emerging trends, or are we just knee-jerk reaction to something that's coming out? Are we scientific enough in spotting these trends?
We're as scientific as we can be at the moment. Is it enough? No. Are we identifying the trends as they emerge? We're picking up on them far more quickly than we were before because we have the communication and because most of us are working in companies which have multi-jurisdictional responsibility. So we can leverage our network of contacts within our own companies or within others, keep an ear to the ground and see what's coming. Are we acting or reacting to it? We're reacting every time. Even when we identify an emerging threat or an emerging trend, well, it's already there. The fact that it's emerging just means we've only just cottoned onto it. How deeply ingrained it is or how far it's actually gone, we don't know. And that's the trouble with insurance fraud. It's the not knowns. And the only thing worse than the wrong information, than no information, is the wrong information. When you only have a little bit, you tend to overanalyze what you've got. So, a friend of mine's into his martial arts and what have you, and he says that action beats reaction every single time. And it does. But as an industry, there's a limit to how much action we can put in, and we can talk about the front ends and the analytics, and it's a people business. We can put as much as we possibly can in place. But ultimately, once the claims start coming in, we're reacting to those. And we need to learn the lessons ourselves in relation to those to try and close down as much of it as we can.
Thank you. Any more questions from the floor, please? Well, Leonard will be joining us now for a panel discussion, so I'm sure some more questions will come to your mind as you